Hi, and welcome back to The Power of Dialogue. This is now episode 8. Today I'm joined by Ryan and George. George has finally been able to come back and join us after a few weeks away. Unfortunately, Tom has not been able to make it this week, though we have got his opinions on the topic that we're talking about. So, the topic for today, as probably most people will be able to guess, is the government's announcement from Sunday and what has been happening subsequent to that. But before I get to that, just shout out for myself and this channel is we've started doing daily news breakdowns on this channel, just kind of breaking it down. So rather than having everything thrown at you and putting an opinion in it, we're just kind of trying to make it clear what the facts are, so you can best be informed and have better conversations with people about it. So, the announcement on Sunday. Does someone want to kick us off on what they thought of it?
I thought it was subpar is how I'd describe the announcement on Sunday. Mostly because the announcement came without any real clarity of what was going to happen next, and they let people sort of stew on that overnight, and they didn't give any more detail other than what was in the announcement that evening, which made a lot of people very worried. And as we saw a massive increase in public transport use on the Monday morning of people thinking they were going back to work. But then also on Monday morning, we had Dominic Raab doing the rounds on media outlets saying, "Oh no, we won't actually be going back to work on Wednesday." So I think the releasing of information should have been done all at once, so that people had a clear outline of what was going on. I think
I did think that.
Staggering.
I've been seeing, I've been seeing a lot of confusion about what he was actually saying as well. And I think that when I literally had a notepad and pen in front of me when the announcement was on, writing down what on earth was happening. And I found when I did that, I was kind of picking out what he was actually saying and avoiding the rhetoric. It makes sense. Whether or not you agree it's the right political decision or the right decision for the country is a different matter. But the actual what he was trying to say was there, but I think the rhetoric around it and surrounding it was just really unhelpful. As well as then the delay between there should have been more. They should have done the statement being longer, and gone. You can meet one person outside. I found the point that Dominic Raab going around the next day was pointless. It feels to me a bit like the government actually went, okay, let's see if people want to now go out and meet people, and then decided to send Raab round rather than going, let's send Raab round to clarify, which is not what happened.
Yeah, our good old friend Dominic Cummings wrote on his blog in the past, I'm sure, don't ever make government announcements on Monday. No one's in the right place or is prepared to make announcements on Monday. It's even worse to try and do one on Sunday, because the document, which actually was more important to businesses and people who are interested and are nerds, which is way more interesting than speech, only came out quite like Monday afternoon, with the guidance following it in drips and drabs.
Yeah, I think it was a misguided strategy from the government to try and not release all of the information at one point and properly explain to the British people in that announcement what was going to happen and properly what changes were going to happen, because they explained it a little bit, but he didn't go into any type of detail on it.
But then I feel he was being attacked for not outlining a plan or whatever. So if he were to sit on all of that until Wednesday, when every single document was ready, and then announce all of the measures would be effective from next Monday, it'd be harassed for not having published anything all for
But even having it published on the Sunday and then saying this kicks in on Wednesday, and then breaking it down for people, explaining what's going on, it would then also give Parliament proper time to scrutinise it.
Yeah.
In between the time of the time it was presented and then the time the policy would actually kick in.
I think one of the other issues with it was that there were so many leaks beforehand. The slogan was leaked beforehand. Boris Johnson's 6 points he tweeted like the previous day. I think that actually undermined the announcement.
But then the number one tool of that we are taught at school so much is if you're trying to make a point, you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it, and so they probably might have leaked some of the announcements themselves to make sure that everyone had heard everything multiple times by the time Tuesday came around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they could have done a better ad campaign or something afterwards. Like, I think that because then what happened is all the papers and stuff started speculating. This is what stay alert means. I think that it got really confused. Whether or not, once again, you agree with the wording, that's a different matter. But the fact the wording was open to such an interpretation.
Yeah, I think it was all very unclear, and it made a lot of people very worried about, job security, safety at work, returning to work, without outlining in full what they actually planned to do to alleviate the lockdown properly, instead of just giving the general overview of what they were going to do. Because I think that's very much what he gave when he, in the Prime Minister's address, it was the general overview of the sort of what would be happening, but there wasn't any detail for people specifically about how to get back into work and what those relaxing of measures meant for them in their daily life.
Yeah, I do think the government made a mistake as well, not having, rather than saying, they should have told employees to start preparing. And employers, this week, get your workspaces ready. Starting from next Monday, everyone can go back. So then it gives the employers time. They can then read the guidance. Because I think that's the issue. That people didn't know if they're going to be going back to work or not, because neither did the businesses.
It did feel like a very rushed. It felt like it was a big rush to get people back to work and to try and prepare all the workspaces for what is expected to go back to work. I think that the announcement either needed to come earlier, or it needed to set a date and then let people know that that's the date that's going to happen, and let people prepare before. Because it really felt like the government were just springing this all on the workers and employees.
Yeah. So just checking, Ryan, can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, because you've frozen on the screens.
Oh yeah.
So I just wanted to check that we hadn't lost you.
Should we talk about the slogan? As we've done the announcement, they didn't announce very well. But what they actually announced was a slogan that no one else in the UK is using.
Yeah. I personally dislike the fact that none of the other countries, none of the other nations are using it.
Well, I think they're very much entitled to not use the slogan, because
they're entitled to not be able to, but I don't think they should take that entitlement.
I think they should. I think the other countries in the UK are being far more sensible about this than England. I think Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are right to keep the stay-at-home message. I think that
we've not stopped. The thing is, we haven't dropped stay-at-home message.
Yeah, it has.
It has. It's
the slogan.
Stay alert.
Yeah, the stay-at-home is still the primary. Is still the primary thing in the stay-at-home is included in stay alert.
It's far more uncertain. A lot of people won't see it as stay alert means stay at home is included in that. It's far more vague, and I think what the government is trying to do is it's trying to give itself more wiggle room to sort of say, this is what we meant by that when people start, maybe breaking the lockdown. And so I think it's giving itself more wiggle room in what its lifting of restrictions actually means.
Well, I'm fully expecting this stay alert to go on for a lot longer than the stay at home, because I think the stay alert can go through probably the different stages of the coronavirus risk assessment. Like, stay alert can probably go all the way down to level 2. The nature of staying alert will be different, but the message, I think, that is going to be a longer term message.
I think stay alert is a longer term message, but I think if you're gonna introduce the message of stay alert, you have to also keep the message of stay home, because stay home is such a simple message that people can understand and get behind.
Yeah, but I suppose the kind of question is they don't want that they aren't requiring people to always stay home now. So staying at home is now not what they're trying to promote, because they want to try and get the economy back up. Well, again, for whether or not you agree with that decision, for the policies for which that they're trying to put across, stay alert makes more sense.
It's difficult for me to argue that I think stay alert is good because I disagree with the policy that's behind it. So
Yeah.
I don't think we should be lifting lockdown.
I'm taking in the kind of localization of the policies, I do think it makes some sense to have that stay alert message instead of the stay at home.
I think it makes some sense for the government because it's vaguer than the stay at home, which means it can encompass more than stay at home can. It can encompass more measures than stay at home can, but because it's so vague, it then leaves it up for interpretation for different people, which can leave people confused.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is the police force and how they're now supposed to enforce it.
Yeah, I think it becomes a lot more difficult for the police to now enforce.
But then there's also now less for them to enforce. The only thing they can really enforce now is social distancing.
That is true.
Staying 2 meters away isn't actually written into the law. It's like the only thing they can enforce is leaving your house not for an essential purpose, which is still enforced.
But no, but the definition of essential purpose has now changed, because an essential purpose can also be I'm going to go sit in a field for a while.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for police to sort of police the social distancing and who's meeting who now that they've said, oh, you can meet one other person from outside your household as long as you maintain 6 meters apart. I think it becomes very difficult for the police to then police that, because like they were saying, and this is what ministers were being questioned on the morning after the briefing, like if your family sees maybe a couple who are family friends, can you stop in the path, keep a 6 meter distance and talk to them if it's 2 different households who maintain 6 meters apart?
Yeah.
And they said no, because it has to be one-on-one.
Yeah,
So what you can do is you can go talk to your mum and maintain social distancing, and then your mum can leave, and then 2 minutes later your dad can come out and you can talk to your dad and talk to him.
Yeah, so
you
we're
can't
currently
put both together.
We're currently experiencing this in my family, because my sister and her fiance they don't live with us, but they're about 15 minutes away. So they obviously, the 2 of them can't meet one of the parents, and then what you need, 2 parents can't meet one of them. So they're basically going to have to go, if they do end up seeing each other, it's going to be, and then you swap partners.
Yeah,
basically.
I think,
and that is technically allowed, which seems a bit stupid.
I'm
in support of the government often, and that seems stupid even to me.
Yeah, I think it seems very arbitrary on what they're doing. They've sort of said, oh, it's like they've made the policy and then haven't really thought through how practical or sensible it is. Because it's all very well and good saying, oh, only one-on-one if you're meeting outside must maintain social distancing. But unfortunately, people with families, it isn't just one-on-one interaction that happens. Often,
it feels like the type of policy that would be made in a GCSE politics class.
Yep, that it does have a feel of that.
they're kind of going, yeah, this is a great idea. Don't ask us how to enforce it. That's not our remit. That's the police. They have to figure that out. We're just saying this.
But because it doesn't really make that much sense. I think a lot of people will either ignore it or just sort of bend it a little bit to have, two people meet one person at the same time, or two people meet two people at the same time while maintaining social distancing, because it's just such a weird rule that it's difficult to properly follow, but then it's also very difficult to properly enforce for anyone else, because you can't look at someone and go, oh, they've just come here to meet up. They could have literally just into each other and exchanging a few words.
Yeah, I think that one of the kind of additional things in that as well is, I think that the government was expecting their app to be ready by now. I think they were expecting to be able to have the app and kind of maybe a bit more technology behind them, and now that's been kind of delayed a bit. And now they might be scrapping their initial system and going to the Amazon Google method.
Yeah, well, the app has been.
They're now trying both at the same time very quickly, so I think they've realised that their system doesn't work.
I think the app has been criticised. It's been criticised a lot by I think it's data rights activists a lot, because there's been worries about the government holding on to location tracking data and name data. For example, there isn't any provisions that say the government have to get rid of it, so they could hold on to it for an indefinite period of time.
It would be covered by GDPR, so they can only hold it when they're within a specific use that they're allowed to. So for public health is a use, but when public health is no longer a reason to store the data, they must get rid of it. That's a
it's the government's prerogative to. It's them who decide.
Information Commissioner's Office, which is independent of government, enforces that, not the government. So
okay,
and the ICO would take legal action against it.
I still think trying to make a centralized system, it's very difficult when you could use private business like Google and Amazon.
Just on that quickly, just on that. So South Korea, I think, were one of the first people to try the app, and they used a centralized system. Have you heard what's happened about that?
I haven't.
No one installed it. It was like 10%.
No. What happened was, so the whole point was obviously, measure social interaction. They reopened nightclubs, which have now all had to be closed because one guy went out with coronavirus symptoms, and their app doesn't work, so they can't find the people that he came into contact with.
Oh no.
That was
so it looks like there might even be like a massive second peak because of that, and actually because their app system doesn't work.
He was a super spreader. He went to between like 6 different nightclubs and infected. He's directly or indirectly responsible for like 30 infections in a matter of a couple of days.
Jeez.
Quite a lot.
Yeah,
it's more than that. I think it's more than that. Like, they kind of mapped it out, and they said something like because of him, there might be now like 1,000 more infections.
You could say the first person that got coronavirus, there were a million infections because of them.
Yeah,
yes.
wow.
That's how infections work.
That is the case, but
actually, we have to blame the bats first.
Yeah, I think this is why the government, I think, is going with I agree with the sort of. I don't agree with the pace of the timeline they set out, but I agree with the steps that are in the timeline that they've set out, where they're opening workplaces before opening a lot more leisure restaurants, pubs, and cafes, because the leisure activities will be where most of the virus is spread. In workplaces, it can be very, very regimented, and you can maintain social distancing a lot. It's a lot easier to maintain social distancing than it is in, for example, pubs and restaurants and cafes. And so I think that's where they've got it right in terms of you need to ease people back into work before you can open leisure facilities.
A couple of things. One, just as I just got the notification through that there have been 494 deaths recorded. So that is down from yesterday as well.
That is down from
Uh,
yesterday.
The other thing was
It-
that I want to kind of talk about as well, which is if we're talking about infrastructure reopening, the schools and the primary schools being sooner, and then the effect that will have on educations around the world. Because what they said, reception year 1 and year 6 will be the first to be going back.
And then year 10 and year 12 in secondary schools as well. That was also published in the advice. I think it's a good idea to bring back those sort of targeted years FaceTime, because they're the ones who are. I think year 6 is progressing on to secondary school. That's a big leap. It's a big change, and in the current circumstances, it's going to be made, more difficult for them. And so I think definitely having a little bit of FaceTime just to prepare them for what's ahead will be beneficial for them. I think the same with year 10 and 12 in GCSEs and A levels, because they're big times in their lives and it's often very, very stressful. However, I worry about reintroducing kids in schools, and what I worry most about is whether the parents will actually agree to send their children to school. Because I heard, I've just been walking around Star Cross, and I've been hearing bits of conversations. I heard some parents going, "Well, if do they expect our children to be guinea pigs of going back to school? I don't want to send my child there if there's a risk they'll get infected."
An interesting thing was in the guidance that they have suspended or intend to suspend the rules that you get fined for not sending your child to school at least until September. So if you don't have a job or your job's going to let you continue work from home, then there is no need to send your child to school if they can keep on doing what there is now. So, and that also benefits the school as they have less students to look after. So yeah, and I think that is the right move, because some people will still be worried, and fair enough that these are different times and attendance isn't maybe the highest priority right now. And what you were saying with like the speed of restrictions being lifted, well, until schools go, even if businesses are allowed to open, until schools are, it's by the back door, not letting businesses open because they won't have the staff until childcare is back. So
no, that is true.
Childcare is technically back though. Nannies and people are allowed to go back now.
That, however, that's very sort of centered to the middle and upper classes. You're not going to get working class parents paying for nannies so that they can go to do their job.
No, but it means my old nanny gets employed.
But I think the speed of releasing the lockdown, I don't think we should actually be coming out of lockdown at all now. I think we should be waiting until until there's a more significant drop in deaths and infection rates.
We have been seeing that recently though.
We have been seeing a drop, but I don't think it's significant enough to start easing lockdown measures.
I think we're currently dropping something like 15% a day.
Which is good, but I think you need to be looking at maybe 100 deaths or so before we should start, or maybe 200 before we can start looking at easing the lockdown. But it might work out, it might not, because I'm the big worry is about a second spike in cases. And the government have said that if they see a second spike, they'll put on the brakes. But I hope that they will if they do see evidence of a second spike.
Their plan seems to be, as long as R is less than 1, in the long term, the disease is over. But it might be worth having a much lower R and strict restrictions until the number of cases is down, who can then pass it on, and then the restrictions can be, rather than a very long gradual progress, but which I do agree with. But they still, the uncertainty on the figure is huge. Between 0.5 and 0.9 is massive.
Yeah, it's a big difference in the number of people getting infected. 0.5 to 0.9. It's a big difference when you think about large numbers such as the population of the UK. It can make a massive difference.
So I think I cut out there.
Very possibly a little bit.
So I had to switch Wi-Fi's.
Should we play Guess What Policy is in stage 2? The policy we all agreed was ridiculous a couple of weeks ago.
Which policy is that?
They're going to ask Sage to look into the merging households into bubbles policy. Which
is that where you have like household and they can interact with each other, but no one else?
Yeah.
So what I could agree to merge household with you, George, and then everyone in my household and everyone in your household can go like sit on top of each other, whatever they want to do without 2 meters, who cares? But we still can't go anywhere near Stephen.
I think that's how it is normally anyway.
I think to be fair, I think there's some idea behind that, and I think mostly it's to do with I think mostly that would be very helpful for people who have just family in 2 different households. Like with my family, I have my mum in one house and my dad in the other house.
Yeah.
And so if they're able to contact each other, it's much more easy for me and my brothers to move between the 2 households than it would be currently. Obviously, I'm not living with them at the minute, but when things ease and I go back, it'll be far easier to travel between them because they'll be able to have contact with each other rather than me having to drive my younger brother over.
If you think the government's struggling with the current trying to announce that some people can go back to work, how much are they going to struggle to explain a reciprocal household merging into bubbles?
See, that's where the app comes in, I think. I think you'll be able to register your social bubble on the app.
That goes against all of the privacy reasons that they might be moving.
It doesn't. It's the same as having friends on Facebook. If you think about it, in the simplest form, it's the same as going, I'm going to add these people to my house, to my social bubble.
But then how many
and then
people
you can just negate them if you're talking about that, but still warn other people in this area.
How many people
they're
could
not
you
added.
have in your social bubble? Because I understand that it'd be 2 households, but say you have a household of 6 and a household of 7. That's then far more people in one bubble than if there's a household of 2 and a household of 2.
But I think that is fair because realistically, if you all do share a common kitchen and common surfaces or whatever, it is going to get between you. You are one household. So, yeah, some people socially would be disadvantaged because they're in a household of 2 and they're going to merge with one other person. But in terms of preventing spread, huge households, if they want to merge with another huge household, it's only going to spread the disease the same amount.
That is the case. I think it'll be very difficult to enforce, and I think that's the point.
I don't think they would try and enforce it. Like the government guidance in the UK on exercise was always voluntary. You could always take an unlimited amount of exercise. The police would never arrest you, but they'll simply make it guidance, and we generally will hopefully follow the guidance.
Most people will follow the guidance with common sense.
Yeah. Also, you know what they do, George? No, they're not using common sense. They're staying alert.
Yeah, that's what they are doing. I think the one thing I'd like to stress about that rhetoric of common sense is, I think often it's setting up the public to take the fall for any government changes that don't work. Because it's very easy to go, oh, well, we'll trust the British people with common sense, and then when one of their policies don't work, go, it was because the British public weren't using their common sense properly. Oh. And so I think it's being set up as a very easy scapegoat for the government.
But I don't think the government was going to struggle to use the scapegoat, because how do you go and blame all of your voters for the problems? That's not. They need to blame someone that's not themselves or the voters. They need to blame it on some other people. That's what the Labour Party's for.
That's what the opposition's for the government.
Yeah, that's always generalise it for one day when Labour's not the opposition. But
We're finally again the Labour isn't opposition.
What did you did?
So long.
One thing I did find interesting was Keir Starmer's follow-up announcement on the Monday.
I thought I also found that rather interesting. What did you think of it, Stephen?
Well, the first thing that I kind of noticed is I didn't know it happened. I was on BBC, I turned the TV on, and it was there.
Yeah, no, I didn't know it
But
happened either.
I didn't hear there was no build up to it whatsoever, which I found kind of strange because you would have thought that they'd kind of build it up a lot more. But I didn't hear on any news things anything that there's going to be an announcement.
No, neither did I.
I only kind of happened to come across it by chance. I didn't think he spoke well in it. I'm not saying what he said wasn't necessarily bad, but the way in which he said it, I don't find him engaging to listen to, and I think that he just seemed like he was there to oppose Johnson. He was there in his suits, and he was there. I don't think there were. I think he didn't put across any interest or no enthusiasm in what he was saying either. I think he didn't seem to be convicted in what he was saying. He just seems to be reading from a script.
Well, for me, I think Starmer. I don't think he lacked in conviction. I think Starmer's convictions are very clear. I think it lacked in substance. I think the speech was very weak. It was like very watered down squash. It was like he was trying to oppose the government, but also not really opposing the government at all. He took a very long time to say not very much in that speech.
Yeah.
However, I will say, his performances in Prime Minister's Question Time,
His performance in PMQs have been good.
Has been very, very impressive.
Can I take the minority viewpoint and say I actually quite liked his speech? That if in past things, like on Brexit, if he'd gone and made the opposition set out how they would do things differently, even not during election times, that is quite a good idea. I think it does kind of go against the principles of only having party election broadcasts, which I don't know how they got around that not being a party election broadcast. But then the government always can do things that they want to because it's a ministerial broadcast.
That is true. I think that the Prime Minister's announcement that he made on Sunday, I think the reason that Keir Starmer could get away with doing a broadcast of his own is because Johnson didn't make the announcement he made in the broadcast to Parliament. He made it on the BBC rather than in Parliament, which he has been pulled up on a couple of times now by the Speaker of the Commons.
Yeah.
I would see what you think about this. I would have preferred it if because the government published the full transcript of what Boris had just said the minute he finished talking. I would have liked if they'd sent that to Sir Keir Starmer, with not that long. Obviously, it wasn't written far in advance, and on strict instructions not to leak it. And he does the presentation immediately afterwards to rebut it.
I think
that would have been good. Actually, I would have supported that
straight away.
I think it would have definitely
a Zoom call.
Yeah, I think it definitely would have given people an idea of. It would given people the idea of an announcement, but then also opposition to the announcement. I think, which is what you generally in normal circumstances, all of this would be announced in Parliament, and it would be scrutinised in Parliament by opposition MPs, by government ministers and government backbenchers, usually. And so I think it would have been far more effective to have Johnson's announcement and then Keir Starmer's rebuttal pretty much one after each other, because it would give people both sides immediately, rather than letting people stew on one side and then not really hear about the other and not really watch it at all, which is what happened. Because I, as a Labour supporter, didn't know that Sir Keir Starmer was making an announcement.
Yeah. I would have really liked them to kind of have just have that communication, because they keep saying, well, they want to work between the two parties.
It's a difficult to see working between the two parties going on. I think people would like to see a lot more evidence of the two parties working together.
Which I think that would provide if you had one broadcast and the other.
In politics, working with other parties means backroom deals that aren't heard about to discuss things that then would happen in Parliament. If Sir Keir Starmer could ask a question from the audience to a government briefing or something, that would show that because the normal means aren't available, that you have to do extraordinary things that aren't normal.
What I'd like is, I mean, this would never happen. This is just my own fantasy. I'd like to see is Keir Starmer at the daily briefing.
Or as a minister, or as a
as a minister, but maybe have like a fourth podium.
A fourth podium of Starmer at the briefing.
So when questions are asked, Johnson can have say something, or whoever's running the briefing that day, and the equivalent shadow minister maybe.
I think that would actually make a lot more sense than the current briefings, because a lot of the current briefings again would be made to Parliament in normal circumstances. Yeah. But I definitely think having the two there, what you'd have to then control is it turning into sort of a question time style shout off between the two, and so it would have to be very strictly done.
What I'd kind of say is it would be, so the announcements would be made, and then any changes. So any questions that are asked towards the government could then also be addressed by the shadow government, saying, this is maybe how we do it, or why aren't you doing it like that? Because we do it like this because we think it's better because of X, Y, Z.
Certainly, I think that would give a lot more. I think it would allow, or it would make government ministers go into far more detail about what they're doing than journalist questions. And I think with the new leadership of Labour, I think
the journalist questions.
I say still keep the journalist questions, but then the questions asked by the shadow minister and Sir Keir Starmer or whoever's there would then make them give more detailed answers, because their MPs are they're briefed and they hear from their constituents far more than people in the press can,
Well, so that's the other thing I liked about the broadcast on on the Monday, was the fact that they actually got members of the public.
I think
I liked that personally.
I think it's good to have members of the public ask questions. However, I think if you're going to have members of the public ask questions, you have to have the opposition there.
Yes, I agree with that.
Otherwise, it's basically a time for government propaganda to members of the public. Which
there's on the government website, there's a form for you to go, I would like to ask a question, but you don't give what your question is, and they're selected, they say, by an independent polling company. So I'm sure that should be investigated, but it's at least the questioners are picked by some form of random process.
Well,
choosing. Can we all say that at least our press conferences aren't as bad as America's?
Oh, well, they've been cancelled now. They don't even happen because he doesn't like that people disagree with him. When he says go pour bleach on
Did
himself.
Everyone at home see the... Because I sent it to our chat that we all have, of Trump walking out of his press briefing.
Yeah, I saw it. It was...
That was quite something.
He is a child. Trump is a child. He's got a very fragile ego and throws temper tantrums. He is a child.
On the topic of idiots in the US, though, like, I've seen people have been backing Elon Musk for forever, but now he's going against a local county ordinance to not restart manufacturing. He's filed a lawsuit to get it, but then he's just going, I can't be bothered to wait for the courts, and has opened his plant.
Yeah,
against rule of law entirely.
Yeah, I think America is in a really bad situation because America are not used to, not, I wouldn't say authoritarian style of governments, but more like bigger government. And I don't think they quite understand that in times of crisis, you need big government. You can't have a sort of free liberal, oh, everyone will do what's best for them, everyone will use their common sense because, and so it's, or what will happen is you'll get, disaster capitalism. You'll have people using their common sense to profit hugely off of other people's deaths and misfortune, which is, and so I think that's why America has real problems, is because they're set up as they're set up in a very liberal style democracy that does not handle having bigger government and big government intentions well, whereas in the Westminster system of government that we use, you can have more government intervention. It's far easier to have more government intervention than it is in America.
The power centralized, it would be unheard of. Like the equivalent of a county there would be like a council here issuing like laws, essentially ordinances. Like our councils don't make the law. That's ridiculous.
Our system is very centralized, which you can make the argument that in normal circumstances, possibly America's system is better because you have more local laws, which means you have more local representation, more power locally. Whereas in our system, it's all rather centralized into Westminster, which is why you have like the idea of the Westminster bubble. But in these sort of times, you can see the difference that in the reaction of the American system and the British system. The British system is set up far better to overcome big challenges because you can have a nationwide response. Whereas in America, it's a lot more difficult to have a nationwide response, not only because they have far, far more people, but because their democratic system is not set up to have a big nationwide response.
Yeah. Just before we forget, because it does take a while, I have Colin's response to the government briefing, the government announcement the other day. So I'll just read it word for word. Imagine I'm doing the greatest Tom impression that there possibly is. And here it is. So he said, the PM had to begin to start laying out a plan for leaving lockdown before the public start to end it themselves. But I think his statement and the following documentation was lacking in clarity and specificity. The document was clearer than his statement, and to be fair to Johnson, his statement could not and should not have covered everything. But when the majority of people have got a substantial amount of their information from his statement alone, it was really important for that to be clear and contain the key message, but I don't think that it did. Stay alert is meaningless unless explained properly, and it wasn't explained properly. I think there should have been a greater focus on what the new guidelines mean for meeting relatives and being outside with other people. I think he tried to cover this, but the go to work if you can't work at home message means people will be mixing with loads of people with no social distancing. In some cases, which doesn't loads of people with no social distancing in some cases, which doesn't make sense when you can't see members of your family. I think the media rounds were also done very poorly and generally added more confusion than clarification. But I think what happens over the next few days will be the main indicator of how successful it was.
Yeah.
I think that's very reflective of a lot of what we were saying earlier. I think is sort of, it was done very, very poorly. So yeah.
We have realistic expectations. A speech for 15 minutes cannot cover the same content as a 50-60 page document. His original speech, where he laid out the reasonable excuses, he listed the key ones. He didn't go and say you can go leave your house to donate blood and to carry out a legal duty that you must do. But it's like he just said they're all available online and you can see the full detail. That's but it was still done badly because there was
Yeah.
no full detail available.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, but also I think a lot of people just won't bother to go and read the full detail, which is why you look at news outlets to go to tell them what is correct. And I think that's also where it became a problem, was the reporting in the media, where you had the Sun and the Mail and the Telegraph all with headlines of along the lines of "Hooray, we're all going to be free from Monday. We'll all be able to roam around. Lockdown's going to end," which gave people a lot of, I think, a sense of false hope, which then which then led to more confusion, because they were like, "Oh, but I've been told we're allowed to go outside. Lockdown's going to end," and so it's.
I think the media actually has quite a lot to and news sites have a lot to answer for after this.
I definitely think so. I think the coverage has been questionable.
Yeah. Yes.
I would. Well, I don't. It depends all on what sources you read. Because to me, the BBC has generally been pretty informative.
Yeah.
And was pretty they've got a lockdown update, which a document of one that was called "What Can I Do Today That I Couldn't Do Yesterday," and it basically says not much more than you could do yesterday. That's what the guy. Not much has changed. You can't blow this up into it was a long-term plan. So the immediate measures aren't big.
Yeah. I think the BBC has been fairly unbiased. It's been fairly reliable. However, I think a lot of newspapers have, I think mostly Telegraph, Daily Mail, and the Sun have perpetuated a lot of either rumours from the government about what's going to happen next, which can often confuse people when they don't see what's being reported in the newspapers are actually happening.
Yeah. Which
I think confuses people and can lead to lockdown issues, people possibly breaking lockdown.
The government, has had discussions about a huge number of policies. If everything they've ever discussed gets leaked to the press as a possible thing, people will think that will become policy. It's not. They've discussed all kinds of things that won't become policy. That's the nature of discussions. But it's if you do publish every single thing that has ever been said, there was lots of contradictory stuff in it.
Yeah, I think that I think that probably the mainstream news coverage that I found the worst in this time is Channel 4.
Channel 4?
Channel 4's news, I don't know what it is, but there's something about what they're doing. It's just awful.
I don't think so. I think Channel 4's been very good.
Maybe it's because they've been slightly more left. I don't know. But they seem in my opinion, they seem to what I call willfully misunderstand quite a lot.
I don't think they willfully misunderstand. Sorry, I think they ask questions which a lot of other news outlets often aren't asking. I don't think they willfully misunderstand. I think they seek clarification on a lot of points that possibly are unclear to a lot of people, and I think they often ask tough questions which a lot of other news outlets haven't been asking.
I think this is one of those things that George. There's a few things in life George and I will never agree on. One being taxes, and also appears one being Channel 4 News.
And I'm not even here to give a balanced view, as I don't really watch Channel 4 News, so I'll have to leave you to
Neither
it.
do I, Ryan, neither do I.
You're just disagreeing because you want to disagree.
No. We put it on the other night, but we started just to avoid it.
Yeah, I try to take in all. I try to watch BBC, ITV, Channel 4, and all the sort of Freeview news, except Channel 5, because no
rubbish.
And I think a lot of the time, I think all of them have. I think all of them have slight political leanings. Obviously, the BBC is lent towards the government because the BBC is a national institution. It generally supports the sitting government, whether that's Conservative or Labour. It generally is. It doesn't support it, as in like outwardly.
It
promote
doesn't
propaganda,
oppose them. It
but
does, yeah.
it doesn't oppose the. And then I think ITV leans slightly right. Sky, as we all know, leans right. Channel 4, I think, is more centre, sort of centre around soft left.
Yeah, I think Channel 4 is
liberal.
definitely left of centre.
But I think Channel 4 is one of the only left of centre TV outlets there is. Like, there's the rest of them are either complete centre or leaning right. So I think there's been fairly balanced coverage across all stations. But the one thing I do think is that newspapers haven't been particularly helpful. I think papers have the most to answer for.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do we have a last quick something that just interests me? When do you think you will be able to stand there and say this is normal now? Whatever it's like now is normal.
Well, I don't know if we're going to be going back to the normal that we had before, or whether there'll be significant changes in society. I think because
I don't think we'll be completely back to normal until September 2021.
Well, I think there has to be, well, to get back to normal, or whatever the new normal will be, there has to be a vaccine that's available, that is distributed widely.
And it's had enough testing so that those people who are skeptical, not necessarily about vaccines, but about the amount of testing that this one will be going through, will then also be satisfied.
Yeah. I don't think we can ever eliminate COVID-19. I think it will be around like it will be around like the flu. I don't think it will have as many spikes, but I think it will always be sort of something that's around. But I think it will become treatable with more research, and I think there'll be a vaccine that's developed.
Yeah.
In order for people to take and become immune to it, but that obviously will take a lot of time. And until we get to that point, the new normal, I think, will be having a tracking app to track and trace, and high numbers of testing.
I think it's one thing that I did find interesting. There, I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that due to the nature of how coronaviruses work, in general, it's actually very hard to become immune for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Hence why you need to have flu jabs every so often.
Yeah.
So it might just become a thing when you go for a flu jab, you also get your COVID jab. You just, or possibly they'll have a 2-in-1 sort of thing where you get both at the same time. And so I think we'll start to return to normal, or we will have returned to normal, or the new normal, when a vaccine is widely distributed and widely available. And I think that's also where I think the UK, in terms of the long term, I don't think we've dealt with it. I don't think we've dealt with it well. I know that other people will say that we've dealt with it better than others, but I really don't think we've dealt with this crisis well. But I think what we will deal with well is distributing the vaccine when it's available, because of the National Health Service and the trust that's placed in National Health Service, and the fact that it's government funded and it's free at the point of access. So that, because in America, if they develop a vaccine, you can guarantee they'll charge for people to take the vaccine.
They'll make millions.
Exactly, they'll make millions and billions out of charging people to take the vaccine. Whereas in the UK, we have a centralised health system which can quickly distribute the vaccine across the nation, which is, I think, when it's available, I think the UK will be very good at distributing the vaccine and making sure that everyone gets vaccinated.
Yeah. Just a question I kind of have, which just a last little question just before we kind of end it there. If you had the option tomorrow to go and have a trial for the vaccine, take part in one of the vaccine trials, would you?
Can we clarify? Is this they're talking about a very ethical, dubious thing of giving you a vaccine and then injecting you with coronavirus to see if it works, or just giving you a vaccine and then letting you go and seeing whether it generally is more effective?
I can't remember. I haven't actually looked that much into the trials, I must confess.
I think it depends how much they pay me.
Yeah.
But
I would probably do it either way. Yeah, generally.
Yeah. I think you're only gonna. I think with the second one, not the first one of injecting you with COVID. I think the second one of letting people go with the vaccine, I think, is going to have to be the problem with deciding whether or not that's effective is you'll have to let those people who you've vaccinated or you're testing it on, you'll have to let them act normally or more normally than everyone else.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
maybe we should just get the entire of the Isle of Wight to do it. They can test it with track and trace at the same time.
Maybe, but yeah, they'll have to, because those people who have taken the vaccine will have to be more exposed than, because otherwise they just might not get it at all, which can give you some faulty results.
They need to be equally exposed, but the challenge is that we're actually doing too well. Some of the studies that started up to test vaccines and treatments had to end because they didn't have enough patients for it to be statistically significant. That is why you now have questions over injecting people to. It is actually a real.
Well, I think you have to do it with animals first. I think that's the
pre-clinical first, but there is precedent for injecting people with.
I think you'll then have to open it up solely to the people who are, you can't have anyone with any underlying conditions, no elderly people.
They said 18 to 25 only.
18 to 25 very fit, people who are, and just make sure that you're not going to kill anyone with the.
We're all safe on the very fit front. That's fine.
Yeah, we'll all not be selected. That's fine for us. But
I'm safe on the not being 18 part. So.
Right. I do think we're going to have to end it there, otherwise we're going to overrun massively. I think that we don't disagree on as many things as I think that some people might suspect that we do. There's a lot less arguing than even I was expecting.
Well, I think we're all reasonable and we can understand what's common sense and.
Tom. If Tom was here, then it would be a complete mess. But no, so thank you, as we're sure, to our many thousands of viewers for watching this. Thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully we'll have a full complement next week, provided Tom can make it, and George doesn't disappear again. So thank you all for watching, and see you next week.